So it seems that at least 59% of you are still not subscribed to the channel, and that is just unacceptable. If you like the content, please subscribe, as it helps me out. I really enjoy doing these stories for you guys. So hit that subscribe button and the notification bell to stay up to date with all of my new uploads. Thank you and enjoy the video. I went to a small therapeutic school with 30 kids. I met my husband there. We pretty much all keep in touch and talk on Facebook. This is about a guy who went to the school after me and was Facebook friends with a bunch of people from the school, including my husband. We look out for each other because some of us have dealt with really bad situations and abuse. I was Facebook friends with Nathan, but we didn't talk. Then one day he posted that he was going to kill himself. People were trying to get the authorities involved, and my husband told me about it, and I said that I'd talk to him because it sounded like a cry for help. I say that because I really tried to commit suicide. I messaged Nathan and we talked. He said he was alright. He was just really upset because he lost all of his inheritance. So his post about him killing himself was just for attention. That should have been a red flag that something was off about him. He started messaging me a lot. I told my friend, who also went to the school with me and the abusive residential at the same time as me. She warned me that he gets obsessed easily, and he messaged her up to 10 times a day. Long messages. My husband even knew about it, but he said talking to Nathan may help him. After messaging a few times, he asked for my number. I regret giving it to him. He started texting and calling all the time. I answered once to say I was busy, but he did not get the hint, so I just said it. Then he asked if he could call in 30 minutes, and I said yes. We started talking, and suddenly he brought up sex. His first said he loved going to the bunny ranch, and he was a favorite girl. He said he's been there a few times, and went on to explain what his kinks were, and described a scene from one of his visits there. I did not know how he expected me to react. This was our first phone call, plus he really did not know me. He also said something like, I don't know how to say this, but I have a very big dick. And a girl told him he was too big and it hurt. He was bragging. I felt uncomfortable immediately, but could not say anything because I was embarrassed. I was shocked. It was like he was trying to impress me. It got more uncomfortable. He started asking me extremely personal questions about how old I was when I lost my virginity and other sex things. I am too obsessed to write. I'm ashamed to admit I did tell him that I was going to be 15 in a couple of months when I lost my virginity. It seemed this entire conversation would be about sex if I didn't do something. I asked him why he lost his money. He told me he met an escort and fell in love. I'm sorry, but I'm still very, very angry. If he had been robbed and hadn't stalked me, I'd be more sympathetic. She manipulated him into giving her money by saying she was going to lose her apartment, bills were due, and she wasn't escorting because of him. He should have known that wasn't real, but unfortunately he bought it. She said she had feelings for him. She told him to wire her thousands of dollars, then he could come see her in California. They'd only chatted online or maybe cammed. He did it a number of times. She always needed more. I honestly don't know how she got him to give her $50,000. So then she disappeared with his inheritance. I did sincerely feel bad for him. I said she was a horrible bitch. Then we talked about Star Trek. We both love, but he kept directing it back to sex. He told me how he liked it, how he masturbated, and the scenarios that he plays out with escorts. I suddenly realized I don't know this guy, and he's making me very uncomfortable. He doesn't even know that I'm married. It wasn't a sudden realization. I brought up my husband whenever he'd make me uncomfortable to try and give him the hint. I answered one of his many sex questions, which made me feel ashamed. After 3 hours, yes, literally 3 hours, I said I really had to go. After that, I told my husband everything, and I was upset. I just said nothing. I'm a survivor, and what he is doing felt wrong. My husband agreed and comforted me, saying I didn't ever have to talk to him again. Yet the next day he called 5 times and left 5 voicemails asking why I would not answer him. He texted a bunch of shit about needing me and to please answer. Then he asked if I was mad. He also kept asking my husband to tell me to call him. My husband should have said something, but he did not want to make the situation bigger. I could not even go on Facebook because every time I did, he'd message me saying he needed to talk to me. It was getting worse. Calls all day long, novel-length texts, and badgering my husband, who finally snapped and said he was contacting me too much, and of course, that made Nathan freak the fuck out more and call and text more. He left a long message crying once, saying that I needed to call him, and that it was important. I got scared then that he'd never leave me alone. He was acting like we were in a relationship. E was right about him getting obsessed or fixated on girls. He called the next day. I could not take it anymore, and I answered. I said he was totally inappropriate with me, and I felt like he was bragging to impress me. He said, I could have said that any time. Side note, I'm a survivor, and I now have a hard time saying I'm uncomfortable. So he blamed me. I got so fucking angry that he was basically saying I wanted him to harass me. I started yelling at him, asking him who tells a stranger about the size of their dick and talks about what kind of sex they like and what their kinks are. He started begging me to forgive him. I said he had to admit what I said was true. To my surprise, he did admit it while he was still crying. I asked him why was he trying to impress a stranger, and he said we seemed really similar and that we have a lot in common. I said we couldn't talk about it anymore, which only made him cry harder and beg me. I told him he was harassing me by calling me all day, texting all day, and bothering my husband about me. I asked him to tell me something about myself besides that I love Star Trek. He could not, but he wouldn't let go. Even after I hung up, he called back and left a 15-minute voicemail. Afterwards, I told my husband. He admitted to saying all the sex shit to impress me. Since he wouldn't stop, I blocked him everywhere. But before that, I texted him that he needs to understand how uncomfortable his conversation would make any girl. And if he lived here, I'd be really afraid of what he'd do. After a month of trying to reach out to me through other day school people, someone must have said he was stalking me. I'm sorry this is so long. By the way, according to my best friend, E, who warned me, the manipulation and crying is not real. He told me he wanted a girlfriend, then said everything, dick size, his kinks, and every sex thing he could say. I feel like he's not a good guy. I swear he was trying to get me to leave my husband because we both had social anxiety. My husband, who's friends with him, actually friends, that makes him a really bad friend in addition to being a creep. Be careful, everyone. A person can seem nice, then they start asking weird questions like, he asked how often I masturbate. I am dumbstruck. A few years ago, when I was about 19, I got a job at a hot dog shop with a phallic pun for a name in a somewhat shady area. The shop was pretty well known and had some fantastically dark local lore. Rumors that the hot dogs were made out of horse meat, that the whole operation was a front for something less savory, or that we had been closed by the health inspector and reopened illegally circulated. But people kept coming back for our delicious hot dogs. I soon discovered that none of that was even remotely true, but it was fun to gossip, and we would often give customers ambiguous answers to fuel their wide-eyed, morbid curiosities. I got used to the quirky characters that would come by pretty quickly. Some older gentlemen rumored to be involved with organized crime, the occasional nightclub owner, tourist, and many homeless and mentally ill people. We would provide food for two. The community was diverse and sometimes dangerous, but people looked after each other. One shift in the early hours of the morning, I was working the register when a man comes in. He has long dark hair and thick stubble covering most of the lower half of his face. The shop is busy and he orders, steps to the side, and keeps chatting to me while other people order. I was used to this. In an area with a lot of nightlife, you get pretty comfortable with drunk ramblings, people hitting on you through slurred speech. I felt okay as long as I was on the other side of the counter. About halfway through, after telling me his thoughts about all the other men in the shop being posers, but before he started telling me how beautiful I was, the man tells me that he is a chef at a nearby restaurant. Like I said, people look after each other here, so I was reassured. But I gave him a fake name just to be safe. I started seeing him often. It wasn't uncommon to have regulars, some even on the first name basis, but when my coworkers told me he had come looking for me, asking after me when I wasn't there, I started to feel uneasy. Every time I saw him, he seemed to be more intoxicated than the last. He would walk in and say, "Hey, beautiful," or "Hey, pretty girl," so casually as if it was my real name. It made me feel really sick to my stomach every time. One night at 2 a.m., I finished my shift, only to step out onto the sidewalk and see him there, on the other side of the road, waving at me. I tried not to think about how long he might have been there, watching me through the shop's large neon sign, cluttered windows. My manager walked me to my car that night. Not too long after that, it was a Saturday night and the shop was pumping. Everyone who has worked hospitality knows exactly what I'm talking about. There was a 40-minute wait for French fries. The tiny shop floor was crowded with people who had rolled out of any one of the nearby nightclubs. Drug addicts and starving people. The 3 a.m. rush of big bulky man in his mid to late 20s started getting in my face. He had ordered fries and been waiting for 30 minutes. I kept apologizing, but that just pissed him off. I was desperately trying to plan an escape from my position against the back wall, behind the counter to the front door, where I could get a club bouncer's attention and have them come over and sort this guy out. There was no hope. The store was too crowded. That's when I hear a sloppy but familiar voice. "Leave her alone." My stalker emerges from the crowd, a mere 5'5". He fronts up against the massive man, and they start fighting. Luckily, the commotion did catch the eye of a bouncer, who ran in and swiftly de-escalated the situation. Shortly after that, I got a more stable job offer elsewhere and moved. But to my hot dog shop stalker, thanks but no thanks. My stalker was in fact watching me at the exact moment that I was confronted by a man ready to physically fight me over some French fries. He jumped in to save the day. Almost.